Anybody using something to hook goggles up to simulator wirelessly? Is there HDMI to analog or something like that exists? Yes, Nutty Brewer. There are HDMI to analog converters, and then you run those into a video transmitter. You can't run it into HD0 because HD0 doesn't have a separate input, but you could do analog. The problem is the latency is not going to be great. However, some people have done it and consider the latency to be acceptable. Are there ELRS receivers that are incapable of inverting a signal? Trying to connect my Beta FPV Lite 2.4 to the old Tiny Hawk 2 S-Bus pad, but 1.6 configurator doesn't show the invert option. 1.6? I'm pretty sure that the invert option was added in ELRS 2.0. So update your firmware.
Our configurated version currently is 1.6. That's the current version of configurator.
Oh, the 1.6 configurator. Well, what firmware version is on the receiver? Or has the invert option been moved to the web UI, Blunty?
Yeah, I'm not sure. I think he's saying he's trying to flash with the new firmware, and it doesn't show the invert option.
Yeah, but has it been moved as a runtime option to the web UI? Is the question. I don't know the answer. Check in the web UI, see if the invert option is there. Also, ExpressLRS 3.3 just has legit S-Bus output if you prefer. Let's see here. Got that one. Do we know the side effects of goggle antennas being so close to your head? Tiny House Creatives, you're talking about the goggles transmitting signal to the quad, which, by the way, analog video systems and HD0, the goggles do not transmit at all. There is no effect of a receiver antenna being close to your head. So if you're using analog or HD0, the question is moot. The goggles are not transmitting. There is no effect. You could ask the question of whether having electronics so close to your head has some effect. And the canonical answer would be no. It's been tested. It has no effect, no meaningful effect. Now, you could decide. Some people are like, well, I don't trust the government to tell me what's safe. I'm not putting any electronics next to my head. And if you feel that way, then, you know, it's a free country. Do what you want. But there's no actual evidence to really support that. The question is, what about if you have DJI or walk snail where the goggles are transmitting and transmitting as much as 1 watt? And the argument, I have 2 arguments to that. Number one, the argument is that there are standards for radio exposure. There are exposure limits, amount of power versus time, and so forth. And the goggles that we use, the FPV goggles that we use, certainly if you are not wearing them for just hours at a time, like if you fly a pack for 2 or 3 or 5 minutes and then unplug and take them off and go do something else and then put it back on. But even if you are wearing them for extended periods of time, they don't reach what is considered to be a meaningful threshold where there would be health effects. And again, you could say, well, I don't trust the government to, and you know, that's your decision, but essentially no big deal. As Kilo Zebra points out, if we have 1 watt of energy, we could easily calculate how, so first of all, this is non-ionizing radiation, so it's not going to give you superpowers or cancer. Non-ionizing radiation does not damage cells. All it does is it raises the temperature of the tissue. And we could easily calculate how many degrees 1 watt of power could raise the temperature of your tissue, of your flesh, and it's not very much. Suffice it, you go out and you stand in the sun and you're receiving many, many watts of power up against your skin in the visible spectrum and the ultraviolet spectrum and the infrared spectrum. It's not a big deal, is the current understanding. It might be a coincidence, but ever since earlier this year when my crew started to use ExpressLRS, I am getting micro failsafes with Tracer. Wow. It's plausible that a bunch of people flying Express LRS would cause micro failsafes with Tracer. They're both using 2.4 gigahertz. Both Express LRS and Tracer. No. Tracer uses FLRC, not LoRa. I was going to say both of them use LoRa, and so they should be relatively immune to interference from each other, but that's not true. Tracer uses FLRC. It does have a LoRa mode, but most people aren't using it. That's entirely plausible. Time to switch away from Tracer. No, I'm joking. If you ran your HD0 transmitter into a signal booster, would you get additional range? Yes. HD0 is a unidirectional communication. You 100% can run it into an amplifier. Assuming all legal requirements are fulfilled, you can totally do that. My O3 air unit only shines green, and I can't bind it with my Integra. Do you know why? Thank you for 5 Swiss francs. I don't know why. I don't, Blunty, you don't know this either. I don't know why I'm asking you, but I'm not sure, so I'm reaching out. I'm phoning a friend. There's no special firmware that's necessary to bind to the Integra, right? Like,
not that I know of.
It's the same firmware version.
Because it releases it at a different time, but as far as I know, everything should be the same. Yeah.
Yeah. I whenever I try and update firmware on a new O3, it's always like, nope, you got the latest.
Make sure you're in the right mode in the Integras, right?
Ooh, that's good. See? Phone a friend. Always works. So the Integra can be in several modes. Same for the goggles, too. Same for the V2 goggles. There's the Avata mode. There's the O3 mode, etc. You need to go, I think it's in the status menu, and there's an option in the menu to switch modes. If you're in the wrong mode, you will not be able to bind to the O3. That's the number one reason for this to be happening. Oh, Stevetrix says where's that question? A couple of your patrons have their own frames. Would you review them? I would not review a product simply because a person who made the product was my patron. I don't take money to review products almost as a matter of principle. I was recently on the FPV Spill the Tea podcast, and we got into talking about some of the economics of FPV, and like if somebody came, like obviously everybody has a number. If somebody said, hey, I've got this new product and I want you to review it, and I was like, I'm not that interested, and they were like, well, look, I'll pay you $2,000. I'd probably do it. That would be hard to say no to. I'd probably find a way to make... I mean, I would disclose it. I'd be like, hey, guys, listen. Like, think about the Raid Shadow Legends stream. I was just like, hey, guys, I wouldn't normally do this, but they paid me $1,000 to do a live stream where I play Raid Shadow Legends, and, like, I'd be an idiot to say no to that, right? But if it's interesting, I might review it. There's a couple things that go into, like, reviewing a product for me. Like, I really want the product to be sustainable. So, like, if it's if it's like one guy and he's cutting frames in his basement, and if I do a video about the product, he's going to get 150 orders that he can't fill. Like, that's not setting anybody up for success, and I might decline to do that. It's a pretty interesting stream. Is that your stream? Or is that your not stream? Is that your frame? Stevetrix? Whose frame is this?
Exxon, I think. It's the Exxon Designs guy, the guy you were trying to figure out the things from.
Oh, the funky washers. This is a render, though. Does he actually make it? I mean, no offense, but is this basically just an Apex Evo? Like, the other question that I ask when I look at frame, I mean, it's a good looking frame, but the other question that I ask when I, like, think about whether I'm going to review a product is, like, what is it that makes this interesting? And, like, my general rule is there has to be one sort of unique or interesting thing about the frame that makes it stand out. Yeah. Anyway, interesting. I mean, I'd consider it.